Guys, what I'd like to talk with you about today is the reaction in the United States to the Great Depression. And I think that this question ends up raising a lot of questions like, what is the role of government? And how can governments impact? I think you want to write it down, I really do. And we actually, we're lucky in terms of being historians because in the United States, we really have two contrasting visions. We can look at how two different people tried to do this. Because the president in 1929 was a man whose name was Herbert Hoover. Oh, that's tough. And Herbert Hoover was a Republican. That was just the name of his political party. And he really embraced the idea that the role of government was pretty small. And, for example, in terms of, a lot of people have lost their jobs because of the Great Depression. A lot of people are having trouble getting food for their family. And Herbert Hoover would say that's not really the government's responsibility. What that really is that's the responsibility of private individuals, of charities, of churches.
No, he's the guy who gave the Hoover Dam.
His name's connected with the Hoover Dam, yeah. So, what is the role of government? Should the government help poor people or not? Right? And the question, it's really important just so that you understand. We're talking about the role of government. All right? Herbert Hoover himself was not against helping poor people. Right? There's a big difference between saying the government shouldn't do this and saying this shouldn't happen. All right? And Hoover's concern was if the government gets involved with helping the unemployed, people will lose their incentive to work. Yeah, does that word incentive, is that okay? Their motivation. All right? And this, guys, I would just point out, this argument carries on. This argument they're having in 1930 is the same argument people have in Brazil about the Bolsa Familia, right? Oh, no. That means people don't look for a job if they're getting that payment, right? This is the line. Emma?
So his concern was that if the government got involved with the unemployment in a country, that people would lose their motivation?
Yeah, so like if the government offers unemployment insurance, for example, which lots of countries do today. If you lose your job, the government will give you a... What's up?
Oh, nothing. You're trying to read.
The government will give you payments until you can find a new job. All right? Or, for example, let's take pension, right? Because that's a big issue in Brazil right now. Pension reform. should the government guarantee that people will have a certain wage when they retire? Herbert Hoover might say no, because that will mean that people won't be responsible when they're. Should I save money for my retirement now that I'm, if I'm 30, if I know the government? Does that make sense as a criticism? So those are Herbert Hoover's criticisms, but they end up coming off, at least politically, they come off as really being tone deaf, as not hearing the problems of the people. All right? Because he's in charge of the government. And even though he himself might be a charitable person, and even though he himself might give to his church and give to his charity, he comes off as really appearing to say, not my job, not our job as part of the government.
What part of the government is he?
He's the president of the United States. Okay?
How, from what year to what year? Was he there for the great? Okay, obviously he was.
From 1928 to 1932. All right? So he's right there in the center of the Great Depression. All right? So how can governments impact economies? Some people would say they shouldn't. The market should decide. Yes. Sure. Some people would say that the government is always less efficient than companies. Why? Because companies are motivated by profit. And profit means that you're going to try to be efficient, right? So if you want to make the cheapest, you know what a great example of this is, like sending packages, all right? If you had to get a package to the United States next week, how would you guys send it there? You'd use FedEx? But why wouldn't you use the Correos?
I don't know.
What?
I don't know.
Yeah. But this is a thing, so what Hoover would say is, of course you use FedEx. FedEx is trying to make money. So if they don't get your package there next week, you'll never use them again. They're motivated by profit. Whereas the government's post office, they don't need to make money, so they're less efficient. This would be so maybe the market should decide. All right? This ends up being a pretty unpopular position to take in the midst of the Great Depression. And Herbert Hoover is defeated, dramatically defeated, by his Democratic.
Wait, but then the reason why it shouldn't be the government is because the government isn't getting any of it.
No, it's because the government is less efficient than companies. So if the government isn't motivated by profit, what is going to motivate the government?
Exactly. But like,
Something
how
else.
is this profit being money?
Yes, making money.
So like only because they're not making money, they shouldn't help the people.
It's no, it's that. So in terms of helping people, what's the role of government? To do as little as possible. Right? That could be an argument. Because you don't want all these regulations and you want to be free and if the government isn't motivated by profit, which it's not, what if it's motivated by corruption? Right? Or special interests. Something like that. Yeah, let me see.
What did he think was the role of the government?
He thought the role of the government, I think, was like as much as possible to like keep order. Okay? So I would say like, what is the role, here, what about this? Like, what is the role of an adult at Graded, right? So I'm up here and I'm just gonna kind of talk at you, right? I'm gonna just talk at you for the next 20 minutes, yeah? This isn't what we do, this isn't what we usually do, right? Usually we do a little activity, we do the whole thing. But, so I'm just gonna talk, so this is like an extreme, what is the role of a teacher? to give information to Alicia, right? I'm doing that. I have information in my brain. It will come out my mouth and you will write it down and you will learn. This is learning, right? The sort of extreme other version of that is like, look at the adults who are like the librarians, right? Literally just right through that wall. They've created a space that's like safe and quiet for you to learn on your own, all right? So those are sort of the extremes, okay? I have all the knowledge. I will give it to you. I will do nothing. You can read it in a book. Those are the sort of extreme versions. Does that make sense in terms of governments?
The government is never going to be motivated by profit. Because then the government is
Right.
sort of...
The government is never going to be motivated by profit. So it will never be as efficient as companies which are motivated by profit.
Because anything that's motivated by profit.
Yeah, that's like what we capitalists believe. That's a big oversimplification, but I'm just trying to help you understand Hoover's philosophy.
What makes him a Republican?
That's just literally the party that he's part of.
It doesn't have to do with him being a right-wing
That depends on what you mean by right and left wing, but no, generally the Republican Party in the United States is the mainstream right-wing party, and the Democratic Party is the left-wing mainstream political party. And if you think of our definitions of right and left wing as having to do with maintain, restore, progress, move forward, it makes sense that these guys would want to do less, right? Because basically they want to keep things the way they are. They don't. It's not like in the middle of the Great Depression they're saying, this depression is great, let's keep the depression, right? That's not what I mean, but let's go back to the time before the Depression, where somebody like Franklin Roosevelt is going to argue for, no, we need to move forward and take steps to prevent this in the future.
So, Herbert Hoover was there for because the Great Depression lasted until when?
That's a great question.
Do you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a debated question.
So, what's your opinion?
I think if you think of the Depression as lasting for like 10 years, you're probably okay.
So the Depression, okay. So this Herbert Hoover man, he...
President Hoover to you, but yeah.
President Hoover, he had a very specific view as to how the government should deal with the Depression.
Yeah.
And it was of not doing very much.
Right.
Because he believed that the market should solve it on its own.
Great job.
And then this man, next president, President Roosevelt, he, so what Hoover was doing wasn't working out very well for him.
Right.
Right, okay. And then when the next president was chosen,
Elected,
the people decided to elect someone that probably had opposing views.
yes.
Because of what Hoover was doing wasn't very effective.
Right. Good. And Hoover would argue it's not his job to be effective in terms of managing the economy.
Because the market should.
Sure. All right. So Franklin Roosevelt comes in right in the teeth of this depression, and he comes in with a big mandate. All right. He comes in. He won in really a landslide. He got a lot more votes than Herbert Hoover. And so he feels he comes in that he's been empowered by the American people and that his vision has been empowered by the American people. And what is his vision? It really is, like we get this nice chance where it really is, it's the opposite of what Hoover thinks. Right? He believes that the role of government is to actively make people's lives better. All right? How can governments impact economies? in all sorts of ways, Roosevelt would tell you. All right? And he would say, no, you're wrong. The government can often do things better than companies because it doesn't have to make a profit this month. It can take a longer term view. And the government is bigger than any company. It can do bigger things. It can coordinate in ways that no company could ever hope to do. So the government is uniquely qualified not just to impact the economy, but also to make people's lives better. And the Depression is the best opportunity we have, where the Depression is too big for any charity or any church to be able to solve these problems. We need the power of the federal government to do this.
So Roosevelt's, you said before that his idea of government was to not to, the role of government was to help the people in any way. Right?
But to take an active role in making the lives of its citizens better.
Whether that be getting to the market or not.
No, meaning that actively it's getting involved in the market.
Yes. If it makes people's lives better.
All right? And Roosevelt comes in and he just starts doing stuff. All right? Very, very actively doing stuff. And he's very famous for what he does in his first 100 days in office. All right? Just for perspective, all right, Donald Trump has now been in office for 100 days. Exactly 100 days today.
Wow.
All right?
That's crazy.
So however long that feels to you is how long this next stuff I'm going to talk about with Franklin Roosevelt has happened. All right? Seems short.
Feels like it was against
Yeah. So Roosevelt comes in and he's just going to bam, 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 bam do things. All right? He's going to focus. He's going to focus on, in terms of banking.
This is the first 100 days, yes.
Mm-hmm. In terms of banking, he's going to close down a bunch of banks. He's going to send in federal inspectors. And then if the federal inspectors say that those banks are solvent, that they're wisely run, the federal government will guarantee the money in those banks. All right? So if you have money in a bank and it gets the government seal of approval, even if that bank fails, you will still have all your money. All right? So this gives people a huge restoration of confidence in the American banking system. All right?
So,
Go ahead.
so even if a bank fails, the money, if these federal agents come into the bank and they say, look, your system before this whole thing happened was actually very good. So we think that you haven't been cheating or doing anything weird with people's money.
Yeah.
So people will not be losing money out of your bank
Right.
because you've been fair and you've played the game fairly.
So what I do is I put this seal on your bank. Okay, I didn't mean to do like a weird anarchist and satanic thing. Whatever we call it, let's call it. It was called the Emergency Banking Act. So you get this EBA. What that says is this bank is a reasonable bank. We believe your money is safe here. We are telling you you can put your money in this bank.
Even if it fails.
And we believe this bank is, we so much believe that this bank is safe, that if this bank were to fail, we will give you the money that you had in the bank. Which means we're guaranteeing that this bank will not fail. This bank will not fail. We don't think it's going to. And then, of course, that has a positive feedback loop, right? People trust those banks, so they put their money in those banks, so then those banks become less likely to fail.
But did they begin to do this with failed banks as well as with other banks?
They did it with most banks.
Even if they were failed? Like if they started, like, if the federal when
Not already having failed banks, but they did it with banks that easily could have failed if they hadn't done this. All right. Then they launched something called the Federal Emergency Relief Administration. All right. This is just $500 million, and this is $500 million in 1933, right? Which just takes care of the urgent needs of the poor. All right. This is setting up soup kitchens. This is handing out blankets. This is just a direct government helping out the poorest people. It really is. It's exactly like the government acting like a charity. Hoover would have hated this, right? This is the job of Christians. This is the job of charities. This is not the job of the government. And Roosevelt really clearly makes it the job of the government. There are people starving on the streets of America. We will not stand by and allow this to happen.
this was like a part of the government now.
It was a law that was passed that created the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, which handed out.
A law that created that administration that was a part of the government.
Yeah. He hires. He creates another group of people where unemployed young men are hired, and then they're sent all over the country to work on like environmental projects. So, cleaning up areas, restoring flood damage, things like that. So they go off. They get sent off for 6 months. And then, here's the trick: is their paycheck doesn't go to them. Their paycheck goes back to their family. All right, so it's not like they're out. So in this way, they're being fed, they're being given, but the paycheck's going back to support, the wife and kids. That's the way that it's being paid out. All right. Then he has to do something for farmers. All right, so he creates something called the Agricultural Adjustment Administration. This helps farmers modernize their farming techniques. And it also creates quotas where no farm is allowed to produce too much because there's just too much food being produced, but prices are too low. Adjustment Administration. Don't worry so much about that. I'll send you a little description of all these programs. Adjustment Administration. But don't worry so much about that. He focuses on farmers.
Helping them to be more efficient.
Helping them to be more efficient. Yep, exactly right. And to help increase the price that you get for food. All right? He's got to work on industry. All right? So he creates something called the Public Works Administration. Right? This is money that goes for infrastructure. And schools. Right? Public Works Administration. This is a great example of that idea I mentioned to you earlier, which is that the government doesn't have to make money right now. The government can plan ahead for 10 years from now. They're building all these roads. All right? And there's people criticize the Public Works Administration. Why are you building all these roads? There aren't even cars for these roads. All right? This is crazy. You're building roads that we don't even have the cars built for yet. Nobody's driving around now. People barely have enough money to put food on their table, let alone buy gasoline for their really expensive car. All right? But a defender of the PWA might come back and say, no. Check this out. First of all, we're creating millions of jobs right now building the roads. All right? And second of all, we'll need these roads someday. Our country is growing. This is the cheapest way to build these roads. We have millions of unemployed men. If we wait 10 years until we're out of the Depression, it's going to be a lot more expensive to build these roads. We have the money now. So we can do two things. What's the expression in Portuguese? to do two things with one thing. Yeah, what does that mean?
Two birds with one stone.
Two birds with one stone. Okay, so in English we say two birds with one stone too. Emma, in Spanish,
Same thing as
same thing. Guys, Korean, what do we have one? Birds? Okay. In Bulgarian it's two rabbits with one bullet.
Oh, that's the same as in Hungarian.
In the app, right? Yeah. Which I like. Do we have any other languages represented here? Anything good? No. All right, so we killed two birds with one stone. We solved the unemployment problem right now, but we also build the infrastructure that we'll need for a longer term recovery.
And why exactly was it cheaper to make those now?
Because the people are so cheap. Because here, you remember that when we've talked about economics, the price is determined by the demand curve and the supply curve, yeah? So there's just a lot less demand right now because people have less money. So the price is lower. The price now and the price 1925. The price has dropped. The price of what? The price of everything. The price of the concrete for the roads is cheaper. The price of the workers is cheaper. You can pay people less. Right? So that would be his argument, right, for the Public Works Administration.
So it's really trying to change the community.
Say that again, please.
Really looking into that left wing thing that they talked about.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. All right. He creates a program called the National Recovery Administration, which offers the opportunity for employers. You don't have to do this, but employers can sign up for this. And what they do is they guarantee that they have good working conditions. They agree not to hire children. All right? And if they do this, they get a stamp that they can put on all their products that says, we're part of the National Recovery Administration. All right? Millions of businesses sign up for this. It's a voluntary program. All right?
What is that?
Should the government be telling me how I run my business? I don't know, but it works. All right? He does all this stuff in 100 days. All right? People have called this the most active time in the history of the United States. All right? Where more stuff was now and lots of people agree about this. All right? Even people, I'm sure Hoover would say he did a lot in those first 100 days. He didn't like what he did. All right? It's sort of the opposite now that we have with Trump, right? Trump has done basically nothing in the first 100 days in terms of passing new laws, or some people think that's great, right? Some people think that's really disappointing. But, whether you like it or not, a lot got done in these first 100 days by Roosevelt. He creates this really kind of interesting thing called the Tennessee Valley Authority. I'll send you a map. You can see what the Tennessee Valley is. But it covers 7 or 8 different states all around the Tennessee River down in the southern part of the United States. And the Tennessee River is just it's a bad river. I mean, I have no offense to the Tennessee River. I feel bad because I'm going to post this video on YouTube and share it with the class, and I'm sure now there'll be some comment from somebody in Tennessee being like, "What do you mean the Tennessee River is a bad river?" But it flooded a lot, all right. And this was really the poorest part of the United States. And so what the Tennessee Valley Authority went through is it killed 2 birds with 1 stone. It built a lot of Martu. What are we calling them? You're going to the place and it has you said the Hereo? The dams? What? Represa. Okay? Builds a bunch of dams that stops the flooding, and what can you use dams for? Generate electricity. So then they electrify the entire south of the United States. All right? Millions of people get electricity because of this. Is this the job of the government, to give electricity to people?
Yeah.
Yeah, you think it is? Okay.
At least
It falls into improving the lives.
What?
It falls into like improving the lives.
It improves their lives. But should the government be making cell phones? Cell phones improve your life. Should the government be making a government car?
But you don't need that to survive, and you kind of need electricity.
Okay, what do you need to survive?
Um,
Electricity.
food, water, shelter.
Should the government have government farms where they grow food and then they give it out to the people?
No, but don't they like help with the farming in some way?
Yeah. No. But do you see that? Do you see how that's a question? And especially remember, electricity is kind of a new technology. All right.
No, because like then
No,
why does the
because-
government exist if,
I think it would be.
Imagine like the government doesn't give anyone any food, any water, any of the benefits that they need to survive. They
Right.
wouldn't have anyone to rule over because everybody would be dead.
No, but the government doesn't give anybody food or water in lots of countries.
Guarantees it.
Yeah.
Tries.
They try to make it available.
They try and make it. Okay, sure. I think a good parallel for electricity in the 1930s would be like internet today. You don't need the internet to survive. People have lived for millions of years without the internet. You could say the same thing about electricity in the 1930s. But then you could come back and say, yeah, but having access to the internet is really important. All right? It makes your life way better. We know that like students learn better if they have access to the internet. We know that small businesses can be creative, blah, 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 and we do all these things. All right? That's called the Tennessee Valley Authority. Okay? Roosevelt not messing around in the first 100 days. But he does it sort of pushes us towards these questions. All right? Now, when he ran for office, all right, he went around, he promised people a New Deal. All right? You know what a deal is, yeah? That's an agreement you make with somebody. What he's basically saying is the government is going to make a new deal with you. We are going to provide you with electricity. We are going to provide you with blankets, right? We are going to guarantee banks. We are going to build roads. We are going to modernize farms. That's the deal. You elect me, that's the agreement we're making. The government is here to help you. So we call this whole program the New Deal. All right? So that's like whenever anybody says the New Deal, they're talking about this. All right? But there are actually two stages in the New Deal. All right? There's a second stage, which we call, perhaps not super creatively, the Second New Deal. All right? And the Second New Deal is longer lasting and arguably more progressive. All right? This is when things, so I'm going to write it in green for my Second New Deal because I'm running out of space.
Sorry, why was the Second New Deal created?
That's kind of complicated, but can I give you like my really simple version?
Yes.
Because Roosevelt believed that not only should he save the country from the Great Depression, but that he should also use this opportunity to make permanent features that his philosophy dictated.
That he should not only
not only should we solve this one problem, which is the Great Depression, but we should also create things that will prevent this problem from happening in the future. So it's not just, we're not just giving out blankets, all right? We're going to create laws that make it impossible to be that poor, for example, all right? So the Second New Deal creates Social Security. This guarantees pensions for older Americans, and it guarantees unemployment insurance.
This was after he was in office.
Yeah, this is now we're in 1935.
Now that he sees that he has this power and that he's done all of that, he's like, okay, now that I know that I've been able to do this, let's try to.
I like to imagine somebody this is be totally making it up, all right? There's no historical evidence for what I'm about to say. But I like to imagine somebody going to him and saying, Frankie, you've done a great job. You've really taken some steps to solve this problem. Now let's make the country the way it should be, right? There's a saying in politics: you should never let a good crisis go to waste. Right? You take advantage of a crisis as a time of great change. All right?
So make the U.S. not just, what do you call it?
It's really, just to be really simple, it's moving the United States to the left in a lot of ways.
Right. His idea was like not just fixing the United States, that's the way I'm saying it.
Not just fixing the Great. How about this?
Making it better.
Yeah, not just fixing the Great Depression, but fixing the United States. All right. So the Wagner Act protects workers' unions. Sorry, it's the syndicates. Yeah.
Should we write that down?
Sure. I will also send it to you, though.
In the Second New Deal, there were pensions, unemployment insurance.
Yeah, and these all still exist today in the United States, all created by the Second New Deal. Yeah. So like the Wagner Act, you can't be fired by your boss if you belong to a union. The word in Portuguese is sindical. Sindicato.
What is that?
Sorry?
We still don't know.
Oh, sorry. You mean even in Portuguese? What a union is it's when workers come together and they bargain, they negotiate, they determine their contract, not one-on-one, but as a group.
So
You can see the advantage of that, right? If I go to Mr. Berner and I say, I need more money for my apartment fee, blah, 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 blah. No thanks, Phil. Go get a new job, right? But if all teachers went and said, we want this, he can't say, go get a new job, because then he won't have a school. Excuse me, I gotta call somebody. Yeah.
So if he fires one, he's like firing all of them.
Exactly. So we are stronger together is the idea. But in the 1920s, if you joined a union, your boss would just fire you one at a time. Right? But the Wagner Act now protects union workers.
So workers can't ever be fired.
Yeah, they can. You can be fired for doing a bad job.
But then if you're in a union, you'd be firing a lot of workers.
No, it depends on what is in the interests of the union. Does that make sense? So, for example, I don't know, but let's just pretend. I mean, like, there is a union that represents teachers at this school, right? So probably that union has some agreement with all Brazilian schools, right? Which is something like, you can't fire a teacher unless you've gone through this step and this step and this step. Okay? So if you're going to fire me for being a bad teacher, all right, and I'm a bad teacher, I'll just set that, okay? But first you have to give me a warning. You have to tell me what I'm doing wrong. You have to give me a chance to get better. Then, you know, if I still haven't done that for 3 months, then you can place me on a 1-year contract where at the end of that, you have to document that I'm still a bad teacher. I am. I'm not trying very hard. All right? And then, only then can you fire me.
And you won't be taking the rest of the union with you
Right. Because they've agreed to this. This is what the contract is for everybody. Now, some people would say, that's great. Workers should be protected against bosses who just want to fire them. You should have to have evidence that they're doing their job badly to fire them. Other people would say, oh my God, this is teaching. You're telling me that my precious son, Felipe, has to sit in class with an incompetent teacher for 1.5 years because you can't fire him? Would you do this with a doctor? Right? Would you make me keep going to the same doctor who's making me sick for 1.5 years?
And then what?
Then we would fire the doctor.
Without giving them a year.
No, we would give him 1.5 years.
Even if people were saying that doctor's terrible.
Well, doctors generally don't, but I don't know how it works in Brazil, but in the United States, doctors generally don't belong to unions. They're not unionized.
That's against the law.
No, it's not against the law. It's just,
Doesn't matter. They're working.
sorry?
They work like more individuals.
Exactly. So it's harder for them to bargain collectively because lots of times they're their own boss, for example. Although you can imagine that all the employees at, I don't know, pick your favorite hospital, unionized together. So this is the response of the United States to the Great Depression, all right? And it remains to this day really, 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 really controversial. People still disagree about how much governments can impact economies. People still disagree about what the role of the government is.
Or shouldn't have been then.
Or should have been then. But even now, they just, I mean, literally, right? This is, I mean, my understanding of Brazilian politics is pretty limited. But the government has proposed cutting back on pensions. Right? And so then now there are people protesting in the streets. That's a question about what is the role of government. Fundamentally, it's a disagreement about that.
Why would people care more about the economy if there's like, if everyone is starving and like everyone's unemployed?
Ooh, I don't quite understand your question. So just,
Like, because you said some people think that the government shouldn't interfere with the economy.
yes,
And some believe it should.
yes.
But like meanwhile, there's people that are like starving and stuff, and they still think that the government should not interfere because the economy is more important.
Oh no, I think, and just like full disclosure, and like, you know, I teach economics, so I have I believe that government intervention is important. So that's just my personal bias on this. I think, and now I'm pretending to say something I don't believe in, but I think someone would say they shouldn't do it because they're bad at it. Like, actually, in the long run, we'll be better off if the government stays out of this. So again, to go back to the teaching analogy, right? There are some teachers who would say, this lecturing thing that I've been doing for the last 44 minutes is terrible teaching. Because I'm taking all of the work away from you. You're not doing any, yes, you're going to end up with some notes and you'll know some stuff about but like you haven't had to do any thinking, all right? And so you haven't been engaged in class, you don't even have to pay attention. You can just be like playing with an eraser or whatever. So yeah, in the short term, this feels like we learned a lot today, but maybe I would have been better off just saying, hey, on your own, do some research, find out about what were attempts to solve the Great Depression in the United States. Yeah, he wants strong government intervention. He wants big teacher intervention. I'm just saying, but like you can understand how the people who say that, all right, who would say that, it's not they want students to be stupid, and it's not that they don't want you to learn about the Great Depression. There's a philosophical disagreement about what the best way to teach you about the Great Depression is. Everybody wants you to learn.
So it's not that they wanted like the people to be poor. They just didn't think the government.
That's the nicest way I can say it. Yeah, right? That's the nicest spin we can put on it. The mean thing is for them to say they don't care about poor people, they hate poor people, the poor people. Okay? That's not, I'm trying not to go, the other teachers are just lazy. They just want to sit in the library all day. I'm not saying that. Oh my God. Yeah.
But in a way, it's kind of saying like, okay, kind of get yourself unpoor.
Get yourself unpoor. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
The context of the Great Depression is kind of
No, I understand that, but again, think about it from the teaching perspective. All right. From the teaching perspective, if I tell you about the Great Depression, you learn about the Great Depression. If I send you to the library to learn about the Great Depression, maybe you don't learn as much about the Great Depression the first day, but then the second day, you learn how to do research on your own. And then you can learn for the rest of your life. Give a man a fish, he eats for one day. Teach a man to fish, and he'll eat for his whole life. I don't know. I'm here lecturing you, so I don't know what to say. All right, so these are the big questions. And so what I'm going to have you guys do for homework is I'm going to have you look at reactions to the New Deal. All right? Was it good? Was it bad? If it was bad because it didn't do enough or it did too much? All right? So I'm going to send you a reading. The reading, the first 5 pages. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 6. The first 6 pages you can look at or not look at. All right, they'll do their recap of what I just told you. All right, and then it's going to get into, then I have for you page 221, 222, 223, 224, 225. I have 5 pages for you to read about. Is that good? No, not good? Really good? Great teaching. About the New Deal and the reactions to it. All right, so I'd like you to do that reading for next time, which I will email you.
And answer